I once caused a stir of unease, an awkward pause in proceedings in the Vatican. And I did it on purpose. I don't want to use the word press ganged, but I ended up in a delegation, Thai Sangha, to the Vatican. And part of the day consisted of a kind of interfaith session. And the interfaith session reminded me of all the reasons why I never attend interfaith sessions. And so the usual kind of platitudes were exchanged, and the leader of the Vatican group, I think he was like the minister of foreign relations or something, was talking about love, and the Buddhist delegation talked about metta, and then the conclusion was we are all on the same page, we all want to live together in love and harmony. And then someone asked me if I had anything I wanted to add, because they realized I hadn't contributed anything. And so this is what I said. I said that it's my observation that, for example, if you have 100 people or 600 people, I didn't say 600, I'm adapting this for today. So if you have a large number of people and you want peace and harmony, you need 100% support for that. Every single person has to contribute. You want silence, you need all 100 or all 600 people if you want to achieve that. But if you want disharmony and noise and commotion, you only need one person. And as far as I can, I've thought about this for many years, that this disproportionate impact of people with bad behavior is an insoluble problem. No matter what kind of program you have, whatever kind of education you have, however well it's organized, you're never going to get 100% compliance. And this small number of people who do not support you will have a disproportionate impact on everyone else. So you can see this in every aspect of life, from families all the way up to the community of nations. And so I threw this damp blanket on this, we're all loving each other and despite our differences, narrative of that day. But I think it is important to be realistic, about what we can achieve in the social realm. And community wellness is a guiding light, but it's not something that will ever really be achieved, or achieved perhaps in certain areas for certain short periods of time. But everything is changing and dynamic and moving. And I am often reminded of a teaching given by a Japanese Aikido master. And his student was American, I think, as I remember. And he exclaimed one day, Roshi, I've never, all the many years that I've been your student, I've never seen you lose balance. And his teacher says, I lose balance all the time, but I regain it so quickly you don't see. And so this idea that we can find some kind of balance and harmony as a kind of a sustainable future, I don't think that's possible. But I think that we can learn the skills that when we lose our balance, we can regain it so quickly that it's almost as if we never lost it at all. And I think this is a more realistic way of the way I look at things anyway. So as far as wellness as a guiding light and something to move towards, of course, I very much support that. But I think it needs to be accompanied by a kind of, wellness, you know? Well, it's like this, you know? It's not, it's not perfect. It can't be. But we can look at the conditions that create community wellness and the conditions that undermine or oppose community wellness. And then we can follow this very simple path of seeking to reduce, mitigate, or even eliminate some of the causes for disharmony, and to learn skillful means to contribute to and to promote social harmony and wellness. But if we get too caught up with the goals and the ideals, then it's easy to get disillusioned and burnt out when you don't see any measurable progress. In the address by Venerable Dr. Dhammapala here, gave us a beautiful analogy of the tapestry of different communities, and I think that's a beautiful model. And there is a diversity of Buddhist groups in Malaysia, which is rather different from in Thailand, which although there are different groups and different approaches to Dhamma, it's a high level of unity. It's one of the strengths of Thai Buddhist society, I would say. A lot of weaknesses, it's one of its few strengths. But one of the key features, I think, which are grounds for optimism is that Buddhism, and I'm speaking of my grounding in Theravada Buddhism particularly, is almost uniquely tolerant of diversity, I would say. And that, why I say this is something that is distinctive or a distinctive feature of Buddha Dhamma, is because our emphasis is on how you act, how you live your life, rather than what you believe. Because if the emphasis is on belief, then it's very easy to end up acting in cruel and harsh ways because you believe that those actions are consistent with your beliefs, and therefore they're not really cruel, they're not really selfish. You can accommodate them within your belief system. And particularly if you take the line that only belief in your set of dogmas will lead you to any true happiness, then you're always going to have a problem with people who have different beliefs. And in my view, the great weakness and stain, I would say, on Western culture is its inability to deal with diversity, or its very poor attempts to do so. A sense of threat with people with a different color skin or a different belief or a different sexual orientation. This has been such a huge issue throughout the history of the Western world. Whereas in Thailand, if you were to go into a village and speak to a relatively uneducated villager and ask them, if people of different religions, when they die, where do they go? And a Thai villager would answer without thinking. They'd say, well, if they were good people, they were kind and honorable, generous people, honest, they would go to a good place because we're the results of our actions. And so whether they are Christian or Muslim or Eastern or Western, good people go to good places. Good people make good futures for themselves. So that's in the very marrow of the bones of Buddhist cultures. So if we have that unique appreciation and recognition of the goodness in others, from other traditions and cultures, how much more so from within our own culture. And so if we look at defilements, okay, there are different ways of, in fact, the word kilesa, interestingly enough, hardly appears at all in the Buddha's discourses. It's more of a commentarial term. So in the suttas, there are different categories of mental pollutions according to context and the level of the mind and so on and so forth. But having said that, if we divide defilements into two groups, there's the kind of the emotional, passionate tanha defilements, and then there's the other group is the ditti mana, views and opinions. I sometimes, this is of course generalization, we say like historically, like Thailand is more of a tanha culture. We're looking at the sort of the dark side, whereas Burma is more of a ditti mana culture. Thai people, very few Thai people can get excited about ideas. And so that's a strength and a weakness. But within communities dedicated to doing good in the world or to using Buddhist teachings as platform, as their tool, as their instrument of cultivation, then we see much more the malign influence of views and opinions. So people who come to Buddhist culture centers and are mostly they're trying to be good people, and they're not just following their sensual desires and their passions and their anger. Of course, they are subject to those defilements, but what tends to be the real problem is views and opinions, and somehow when we can invest our views with this is how it should be, or this is the Dhamma, or this is the Vinaya, or when we feel we're right, that's the danger. We're right and they're wrong. And the Buddha would roundly criticize people who say, only I am right, everyone else is wrong. So that's a real red flag is a real signal. So we do have that in Buddhist communities. We do see that, don't we? You know, only my technique, my method, my way, or our way is the true way, is the real way. And if you're not outwardly critical of other groups, then it can be kind of patronizing kind of attitude. Yes, they're very nice, you know, good people and so on, very sincere, but you know, what a shame they don't, you know, they don't quite get it, you know, like we do. So those are the kinds of things that undermine harmony between groups. There's a lack of humility, and I think we can look at groups. We had the analogy of a tapestry. I think also analogy of languages. We're all trying to communicate. We can use different languages, and we can't say that one language is better than another, and that we can find ways to translate between languages if we have the goodwill and the interest to do so. Now, within different groups, one of the distinctions I think is important to make is between attachment and loyalty and commitment. So when I was at WACANA, sometimes when people come and they'd be a bit intimidated with all the form and the vinaya, and people especially who'd only ever been in meditation centers. And it seemed like, why do you need all this stuff? You know, all we're really trying to do is to liberate our minds with meditation. And people would say, you're attached to your rules and your conventions. And my reply would be, well, what is your criteria? How do you decide when someone is attached? You can't see attachment in somebody's mind. On what basis are you making that judgment? And I gave analogy of driving a car. So everybody in Thailand drives on the left-hand side of the road without exception, except when they're drunk, maybe. But I don't think it would be a valid criticism to say everyone's attached to driving on the left-hand side of the road. Thai people go to America or country or where people drive on, they can adapt quite easily. But there is an agreement, and there are certain agreements where you can relax them somewhat, or you can be more strict and more flexible according to time and place. But there are other agreements where you have to have 100% compliance at all times, such as driving on the left-hand side of the road, or the side of the road that is legal in your country. And so you can have a commitment to certain standards and certain ways of doing things, and you have a loyalty to them. And that sense of being part of a community and upholding the conventions and the regulations and the culture of that community, that is a fundamental part of social community wellness, upholding the conventions and the culture of your community. And that can become a source of attachment, but it doesn't have to be. And in meditating communities, you should be developing this questioning, curious mind as part of your Buddhist education. So you're not taking anything for granted, but you see the value of having a way of doing things which doesn't change. And it's not perfect, of course, and when people new people come in and say, why do you do it like this? Why don't you do it like, it'd be so much more efficient, or it'd be so much, and you don't want to be just shutting people off and saying, what do you know? But when new people come into a community, one, they can see things that are a bit weird, that you just become so used to that you can't see them anymore. And that's why it's important to have new blood coming in and being open to listen to the opinions of people who are coming to what's normal to you completely afresh. But at the same time, people who come fresh, they have no idea of all the causes and conditions and all the history behind why you do what you do. And when I was abbot, I found that, for example, sometimes having to make choices which were not win-win choices, but lose-lose choices. And I think this, if you're a leader, you're probably familiar with that. It's like the lesser of two evils. In monastic life, hopefully you're not actually evil, but lesser of two undesirable outcomes, let's say. And yet, people looking from outside will assume that the decision you made is because you think that's a good decision. And that's you're fully behind that. Whereas your own perception of that may be very different. So worldly dhammas are very much a part of community life, and learning how to deal with you and praise and blame and gain and loss and so on. These are all part of being a human being. Now, we volunteered for this stuff, that we didn't, nobody forced us to be reborn in this realm, we took it on. So deal with it, it's like if you go into a forest and mosquitoes start biting you, you don't say, that mosquito should not bite me. I should be able to enjoy the beauties and the majesty of nature without insects biting me all the time. Well, you find insects irritating, but I don't think anybody, I hope, thinks that insects shouldn't be there. They live there. You're just walking through for a day visit or a camping trip. It's where they live. So, similarly, we're in the human realm, and there's always going to be gain and loss, praise and blame, and all the worldly dhammas, status and loss of status, and so on and so forth. And this is part of Dhamma practice, coming to terms with these things. You're developing tools in the formal meditation practice, enabling you to deal with these things, and enabling the ability to learn from experience rather than simply reacting. And one of the benefits of a regular meditation practice is that your sense of time changes a little bit. And it's somewhat similar, there's somewhat of an analogy to elite sportsmen or women. If you were to take the elite from every sport and try to find some common characteristic, I think one of the things that you hear again and again is they just seem to have so much more time than their competitors. So it's not clock time we're talking about. It's just this sense that they're unhurried, that they have that sense of time. And through meditation practice, there is this kind of subjective slowing of time between an impact through eyes, ears, nose, tongue, and the response. So reaction becomes response. You're able to bring your understanding, your values, your training to bear on the present moment. Without that, then we see again and again in society in general, in general and communities where people know, they know it all. You know, they've read the books, they've heard the lectures, and they can talk about them themselves. And they can advise other people. But in a crisis, they just can't remember. They can't bring what they know to bear on the problem at hand. And it's somewhat similar to having a beautiful, powerful vehicle parked outside your house, and you look through the windows and you say, "Oh, what a beautiful, powerful car." But then when you need to use the car, an emergency, you can't find the keys. So that car is, you know, it's there and everyone can see it and you can be proud of it, but it's not fulfilling its function because you don't know how to keep the keys with you. And this is such a huge problem. And even in Buddhist communities, isn't it? I mean, that if we're not doing the work and we're not looking after our minds, we can't live up to our standards and our values and to be an example of the Dhamma. And in teaching, the end of the day, we teach who we are. That's what you remember more than anything else. And I remember, like in the late 80s, I spent a lot of time traveling around interviewing family members of Ajahn Chah and disciples, monks, and in order to prepare a Thai biography, which was published at his funeral, for his funeral in 1993, and formed the basis of a book I wrote in English many years later called Stillness Flowing. But I would interview people and would ask them, you know, "Oh, Ajahn Chah was such a great teacher. Do you have any one teaching, some special?" I get asked this a lot as well. You know, some one really profound teaching that, you know, you'll never forget. You know, something from my book. You know, it's what kind of things that makes books interesting to read. And almost everyone would say, "Yes, absolutely. Oh, there was just one. Oh, yeah." And I'm got my like recorder in front of his nose by this time. He said, "What happened?" And he said, "Oh, I was just in such a bad state. My my wife had a serious illness. My son had all these gambling problems, and I'd lost my job, and I was, you know, on the end of my tether. And I went to Wat Pah Pong, and Luang Por Chah, he gave a talk, and then he said something that just changed my whole life." And I thought, "Yeah, what?" He said, "Everything changes." And so I thought, and just my idea of this incredible anecdote from my book is just like, and this happened over and over again. And I realized it wasn't so much, sometimes it was the fact that they were ready for that and mature, and it was just the right time and place to hear a teaching that they'd never heard before, that they'd heard many, many, many times before, but this was the first time it really entered their heart and was meaningful to them. But also it was just who Ajahn Chah was, and for me this was certainly the case. When I was first at Wat Pah Pong, I didn't speak Thai, but I just felt that there was just no question in his presence that, Magapala, Nibbana, enlightenment is possible in this day and age. There is such a thing. And he was the living embodiment of it to me. And that was far more supportive in those early years than any teaching he gave. And in community life and community wellness, it's embodying the teachings or trying your best to do so. That's what really promotes and contributes to community wellness. So the outside and the inside, they're always going together. And I've had conversations with friends in the Mahayana Sanghas in China, particularly in Tibet, and talking about Theravada approach and responding to those kind of stereotypical criticisms of Theravada as being too kind of focused on liberation of oneself and not for all beings and so on. And my response to this is that if we neglect our own spiritual welfare, our ability to promote the welfare and happiness of others sustainably over a long period is compromised. That without knowing how to look after your mind, then it's very likely that you will get burnt out because you don't have the inner resources to deal with all the stresses and strains of helping others, of which there are many. And helping others, there are very few measurable outcomes that you can say, yes, I've achieved this. And without knowing how to look after your mind, you will often get caught up in those personality conflicts and conflicts of view and opinion about policies and agendas and so on and so forth, and not being able to avoid identifying with your position on things and ending up having to protect and fight for views and opinions that you have become known for. And you lose the joy of helping others. You lack the wisdom in helping others. And so much of what you learn in meditation enables you to contribute positively and creatively to your community, and most importantly, sustainably. So many people start off with these ideals of self-sacrifice and helping others and doing good things, and then they overdo it, and they don't know their own limitations, and just guided by this passion and pure intention, and then they can't manage to do it for very long. So I said, yeah, it's Theravada, we're the boring ones, we're the plodders, and we're quite happy to be a plodder. We take care of ourselves at the same time as we take care of others. And we see that the more we take care of ourselves, the better we are able, the more the quality of our assistance and contribution to our communities, it increases. And in helping others, at the same time, that also helps our own inner practice. So this beautiful fluid interaction between the benefit of oneself and the benefit of others. This is very much an essential element, I think, of the Theravada Sasana, the Buddha Sasana. Returning to the point that I made right at the very beginning about the disproportionate impact of people who are not committed or just want to make a fuss or undermine what other people are doing for one reason or another. Here we see the importance of sila. So sila are very clear-cut agreements and commitments as to what kind of behavior is acceptable and what is not. In the great university of Nalanda, there was a huge diversity amongst the student body. Came from all over Asia, from this part of the world, as well as from India and the north, the south. And given that there were what we would call Theravadas, members of other groups, and Mahayana and Vajrayana, and so on and so forth, then how did they maintain any harmony and an overall sense of unity? And it was Vinaya. And this is very much a Buddhist approach. It said, your views, your beliefs, your meditation practices, that's up to you. You have a great deal of autonomy there, but you have to conform to the Vinaya. You have the shared agreements regarding actions and speech. And so I think this is something that it need to come back to that again and again, and to ground agreements and precepts within the field of our values, and in families where you tend to get teenage years, the teenagers want to rebel and why do I have to do this, and I don't like being forced to do something I don't want to do, and so on and so forth. In Thailand, we developed sort of having a kind of like a family constitution in which the family members come together and discuss and try to enumerate the values, what makes our family what defines our family, what do we uphold as a family, what's our family culture. And once you have an agreement of all the family members as to the guiding values, the values you aspire to, the values you want to uphold, the things that you make you proud of yourself. Yeah, this is who we are as a family. So this is a conventional identity. Then from there, you go on to the individual agreements and things you do and you don't do. So in one case, a teenage girl, I think 12 or 13, she was asked what she had any suggestions to make in the kind of list of do's and don'ts, and she said, one of our values is mutual respect in our family, and I would like to suggest that on that basis, if mum and dad want to come in my room, they should knock on the door first. You shouldn't just walk in. So you can come to very sort of down-to-earth things that cause a lot of unnecessary friction in families by relating them to larger values which everyone is signed up for. And that can apply to any kind of community, and creating the sense of wellness where people don't feel that rules and regulations are being imposed upon them from the top, and that they have no autonomy, no say in the matter. So it's not advocating like a democratic system. And in a family, I think that the wishes of parents, at the end of the day, they have to come first. But it does mean that there's including and listening. And Ajahn Chah himself, when I was a young monk, there was some controversial topic, a matter of some disagreement in the Sangha. He would have a meeting of the senior monks and open the floor who wants to say something about this? And nobody knew what his view was. So you couldn't just sort of say something that, some people would just want to say something that they think would make the Ajahn happy. Nobody knows what his own view is. And so more and more people coming up, I think this, I think that. And then he would sum up everything he'd heard. So you knew that he'd listened and given some consideration to your view. And then he would say, my decision, what I want to do is this, and these are my reasons. And so the people who wouldn't have taken that position and had actually argued against it, they were able to take that on. One, because they felt heard, and secondly, they trusted in the integrity and the wisdom and the compassion of the leader. So a leader needs to have that sense of authority, and particularly in a sense of having no favorites and being even-minded and listening to everybody, and then taking responsibility for their decisions, and also that they need to be recognized as legitimate leaders. Now, there's many societies around the world, often a crisis of legitimacy. Is that leader really a legitimate leader? Do they deserve to be where they are? And so that can be in the back of people's minds. They have to deal with that also. So for the basis of, fundamental basis of community wellness, everybody has to feel safe. And that word safe is something to recognize. The meaning of a number of key words that we use has changed over the past few years. And I've been caught out by this one, talking about safety and assuming that my meaning was understood. But the word safe these days has come to mean feeling mentally secure. So if somebody feels anxious, upset, often they can say, I don't feel safe. And that's a departure from the way that I would use it, or I think in Buddhist sense we would use it. And we're saying with the 5 precepts, we give the gift of safety. That's your bottom line. And the Buddhists referred to the 5 precepts as the great dana. It's the great offering that you can give to the people around you. You can feel safe, that no matter, even if I get angry with you, I lose my temper, I'm irritated, I will not abuse you in any way, physically or verbally. I will never take anything of yours. I will respect your property. If you're in a committed relationship, I will never cheat on you. I won't lie to you, deceive you. I won't take alcohol or drugs which will prevent me from honoring those first 4 promises. Then by keeping precepts, you create that sense of safety, and from safety comes trust. And that's the bottom line for community wellness. You can't compromise on that. If you're not keeping even one of the precepts, or maybe you don't think the 5th precept is so important as the others, then that sense of safety and trust is lost. And if it's lost, then you have to put a lot of effort into re-establishing it as quickly as possible. And there is a sense, the other important factor is the Brahma Viharas, and actually developing this metta and karuna, and developing this, and just becomes second nature. The recognition of goodness and appreciation of goodness, the mudita, this is such an overlooked and underappreciated virtue. Because if you are on the lookout, if your eyes are skinned and sharp, and you're not just developing positive thinking and trying to look at things in the best possible light, that's not what this is about. Mudita is opening your eyes and your ears and just seeing how many small, insignificant acts of goodness occur around you in a day. Every now and again might be some kind of really dramatic thing. You want to lift your hands and say sadhu, but that's not necessary. Just very small ways in which human goodness is expressed in the actions and speech of those around you. And when it's like it's a bit like Lumpur Sumedho's sound of silence, or it's the sound of goodness. It's something you can tune into, and you become better at it as the more you do it. And it's this constant drip, drip, drip of goodness that refreshes the mind. In the sutta teachings on mudita, it's very interesting that the Buddha doesn't usually pair mudita with jealousy, as we tend to assume. So metta is paired with anger, and karuna with cruelty. And I think most people assume that mudita is paired with jealousy. But where in the sutta, most commonly, Buddha pairs it with arati. Arati, so rati is often used for like passion and sensual passion, and arati means just this kind of sense of everything is grey and dull and meaningless and insipid, and there's no kind of joy. So it's a lack of joy. And arati is a major reason for people giving up on Dhamma practice, or monks and nuns leaving the monastic order, because everything is kind of shriveled up in there. There's no kind of joy in the holy life anymore. And the something that prevents that and brings just a basic sense of individual well-being, which translates into community well-being, is appreciation of goodness, and a kind word or a small gesture of support. Somebody, you see somebody's miserable, somebody else just sits down and gives them 5 minutes of their time, and you see that. That's a wonderful thing. Somebody's walking along and person says, just be careful, it's a bit slippery over there. Make sure you don't slip. They didn't have to say that. Where does that come from? That's the most beautiful thing. If you're mindful and in the present, just the arising in the human mind of a kind thought, what could be more beautiful than that? There's no painting, there's no landscape, they're just the arising of a wholesome Dhamma in the mind. And seeing kusala Dhammas, it's not just a sort of a category of Buddhist doctrine in the Abhidhamma, but it's something that arises and is expressed in all around you, all the time. I have a story, I might have told this in, 2007. No, I couldn't have told it in 2007 because it hadn't happened yet. So, long time ago. I was on my 60th birthday, to celebrate my 60th birthday, I decided to walk from Bodh Gaya to Kusinara. And I had a lot of gratitude and mudita for all the work of the people who create Google Maps. Because I was able to craft a path through the countryside and along minor roads, even buffalo tracks and small irrigation canals, and walk that 400 kilometers or so, hardly having to walk along a major road at all. And I sleep rough in abandoned houses or haystacks, my favorite, because you can just snuggle into a haystack and bring hay over the top of you. So I enjoy this kind of adventure. And it's cold, and I had a mishap, and I'd lost some important items, my needle and thread, but most important, my flashlight, and my woolly hat. And it was really cold at night, so that was a significant loss. And then this fog came down. It was just so thick fog. I don't know if anyone has experienced a North Indian fog. You know, you just literally can't see more than a meter ahead of you. And so I was walking into a town at about 6 in the morning, thick fog, and I heard the sound of 2 ladies walking towards me. And I thought, my goodness, I'm just going to loom out of the fog. This big white figure with a shaved head and bags, and I'm just going to frighten them. I hope they don't have a heart attack or something. But there was no choice. So I walked on, and suddenly we're confronted with each other. And this woman, her immediate reaction was not to scream or sort of, oh my God, what's that? She pointed to my head, and then she pointed to her head, on which she had a woolly hat. And she made it very clear through sign language, I should put a hat on, otherwise I was going to catch a cold. And for me, this was such a revelation that woman had a split second. Where did that come from? That concern for a complete stranger, someone she'd never met before, someone she would never see again in her life, someone who suddenly appears out of, which for most people would be frightening. And the first thought that came in her head was concern that I might catch a cold because I didn't have a hat on. And that's the kind of goodness that arises in the human mind, even in people who are not cultivating the Dhamma. But the more people cultivate, then the more it arises, because goodness is a function of wisdom. This really important point. You don't have to be grateful. You don't have to be this and that. It's not you should try to be a certain way. But the more you practice, the clearer you see, the more the defilements lose their grounding. They lose their root, and the more these wholesome Dhammas arise. So practicing the Dhamma, and the Dhamma is expressed. It's not a kind of a conscious thing, but you contribute to your surroundings. Sometimes you're in a very emotional scene where all the family members, everyone's panicking and getting angry. And how do you contribute? You're just sitting there quietly, the still eye of the storm. And suddenly people can just see you there, and they just kind of relax a little bit. You don't have to say anything, you don't have to teach anything, but just. And so many monks and nuns and lay practitioners in the early days, so much kind of criticism and cynicism, opposition from family members who don't understand. And then over the course of years, they get a phone call from some family member who's got this serious problem in there. I don't know who to talk to. And they just feel calm when they're around you. And then there's some family dispute, and somebody said, would you come be the mediator. You're the only one in our family who can keep calm when everybody's losing their tempers and I've seen this in so many cases, that people become a refuge for their other family members, and they play a role in the family because due to their Dhamma practice and the things that they've developed within themselves. So on the path of practice, in the training that I developed during the 1990s with Ajahn Pasno at Wat Nanachat, and we tried to develop an all-round training in which monks would have periods of solitude alternating with periods of functioning in the community, because we felt that these were two complementary kinds of Dhamma practice. That if someone is, some people are very good alone and not very good in community, and so that's something that needs to be remedied. And some are the other way around, very good in community, can't handle solitude. Some people love solitude, can't handle community, and develop some all-round ability to be present, be awake, be aware, be able to learn, be able to contribute, whatever, whether you're alone or one friend, two friends, or 100 people together. And when you're alone, you have continuity of practice, you have intensity, you're able to customize your practice to suit your personality and your and so it's very good for dealing with hindrances. But you can spend a lot of time alone and develop good samadhi and learn how to deal with hindrances, and yet the conceit and attachment to views and opinions can remain almost untouched. And you see this for people who've spent too much time alone. And so when they go to people who are used to practicing alone too much, they go into community and they say, oh, it's just, I can't handle all this. And I can't maintain the state of mind that I want to maintain. And as monks, then you have all the suttas to back you up. You can say, yeah, Buddha says, go off and strive alone in a cave and a mountain. That's what I should be doing. And not seeing what's really going on, but using suttas as a pretext. And similarly, to people, if you're very good in helping others, you're selfless and you're kind and so on, but it's very easy also for that to become an escape from what's going on inside you. And that's a danger. So some period of solitude and some period practicing and seeing what comes up in community and learning from that. And so these two things are complementary in practice. Periods of retreat and periods of service. They complement each other. And so ultimately, our goal is our long-term welfare and happiness of ourselves. That's nothing to be shy about. Nobody's going to do this for you. You do it for yourself. But this is not time for yourself. It's not like subtracting from time with others, because the more effort you put into your internal development and cultivation, the more wise, sustainable, creative support you'll be able to give to your communities. So this is the talk I would like to share with you today.